Hello and welcome to Business Today. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching our continuing coverage from the World Economic Forum at Davos. And in all of the discussions that we have had, this one is really interesting because we are going to look through the green glass, as we are calling this session, and with me two guests who can give us some insights into the topic at hand. Dhruv Sawhney, the CEO of Nurture Farm, and with us here, Rhea Mazumdar Singhal, the CEO of Ecoware Solutions. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with you, Dhruv, and you've been spending your time here, obviously, in sessions. There are three headlines from Davos this year. One is Russia. We are not going to talk about the politics. The other is inflation. And the third is food security. And all of it, in fact, is interconnected.
Correct.
What is the food security issue all about from your own point of view?
See, I think we are coming on the back of a phase where COVID suddenly brought this front and center. Right? And we were all alarmed and aware that are we going to get food in our supermarkets and at our local grocers? And I think we all saw how important agriculture and food supply chains were. I think what's happened in the last few months is the conflict has really escalated. The inflation has exacerbated that situation. And now there's a certain level of worry that's very much palpable around WEF this week and in all the conversations that are our food supply chains secure enough, or are they going to get so disrupted that we're going to see things spiral out of control?
Can I ask you a follow-up before I come to you, Rhea, and please feel free to jump in. Is this food security crisis a crisis of the developed world, where their supply chains are integrated, avocados come from somewhere, their plums and pears come from another country? And I ask you this vis-a-vis India, where we have substantial supplies of our own and we are top producer in several categories. Is this relevant to India as well, or just for Europe and for the rest of the...
I think we are blessed in India because we have a food surplus. We've over the decades really heavily invested into securing our own food supply chain. So I don't think it's as much of an issue for India. And so...
Rhea, that same point, and to add just one more quick point. Therefore, howsoever bad it may be, the fact is it's a consequence of how globalization, as far as food supplies is concerned, has come unstuck due to the war and the rest of it. And India, which kind of protected its food production systems and is still a primary agricultural commodity grower more than a processor and an exporter to some extent, is in some ways, as he puts it, blessed to be out of this?
Yes, I think just to touch upon your point with COVID, I think what we saw is there was a lot of support local, right? So there were a lot of entrepreneurs that came about. There was a lot of things that were being innovated from an agri perspective. There was, a lot of produce just being, I think maybe typically that we would have imported. Now we were looking at ways to how do we make this in-house? How do we supply in-house? And I think it's a great opportunity for India to become a serious international supplier as well.
Okay, but we don't seem to be keen to, follow up on that particular aspect that you said, because our priority right now is to ensure domestic supplies and domestic prices. And that's where some of the policy actions of the government, which is raising restrictions for exports and also trying to ensure that domestic prices remain down. That's a short-term measure, but you are saying that in the long term, that is what we should aim for?
Look, I think it is where the world is right now and how India is performing in the economy as well. I think it is a great opportunity for us to establish ourselves, right? I can tell you from a manufacturing perspective for what we do, we're in the space of sustainable packaging. And as we're looking, the world is looking to de-risk from China, that we're getting a lot of inbound inquiries. It puts us on a global map.
And what are those? Can you just give us a sample so that the viewers can contextualize what you're saying?
Sure. So we basically take agricultural waste, such as wheat, rice, and sugarcane, and through a thermoforming process, convert it into packaging that is naturally biodegradable and compostable.
And
right?
this was your startup idea?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
So I started Ecoware in 2009. And we now supply the Indian Railways, Etihad Airlines. We now supply the entire country, basically Kashmir all the way down to Kerala. And we have been very authentic. So we've certified every claim we've made on our product, which has allowed us now to also operate in 16 countries globally. And that's what I mean. So now, in the last 6-7 months, what we're seeing is that we're seeing plastic bans coming across the world. Obviously, India is coming into that one on the 1st of July. And we are starting to export a lot to North America, to Europe, to the UK, and
you think the plastic ban for packaging in India is a good thing?
Of course it is. I think it's a good thing across the world. I think we need to, a lot of the conversations.
Sorry to interrupt you. Things are good, but only for the classes. What about the masses?
We've created Ecoware for the masses,
but
right?
It's expensive.
Let me come to that.
Yeah.
So when I started
in the Indian context, I'm not talking about a supermarket here.
Agreed. I'm talking about Indian context. The Ecoware was founded as a solution to an Indian problem, right?
Yeah.
We throw all
that is disposal of waste, but I'm specifically trying to pin you down, if I may say, on the plastic ban.
So let me tell you, from a cost perspective.
And if you want to ask my position on it, I'm undecided, but I get really sort of rattled by bans of any sort. But please continue.
Fair enough. So when I started, the cost differential between plastic and a product like Ecoware is 3x. And with economies of scale, we have brought that down to 10%. And as we scale even further, which is exactly what we're doing at the moment, we will be on par with what a plastic plate costs.
Dhruv, I ask you this question, and I remember something many, many years back which perhaps taught me a bit about the diversity and the challenges that the Indian economy faces. I was in Hyderabad, and these were the days when malls were coming up. It was the big thing, early 2000s, maybe 2001 or 2. And I walked into this mall. It was air conditioned. I wanted to buy something. And as I was walking out, I see a barefoot laborer with red earth, which is the Deccani earth around his feet.
Yes.
He walked in, paid, I think, for a popular soft drink, came out and had it. And it was a very sort of stark reminder of the challenges that India. And I was very happy that this guy walked in with great confidence. But I make the point that while this is an example I have quoted to you, there's also an example of people getting their tea from a tapadi and putting it in a polythene bag.
Yeah.
And that's what, whenever people say, oh, polythene is bad, of course it's bad, but it's bad because the developed world used it.
Correct.
And sort of extracted every last penny worth of that. And now for a country like India, there is barely any money that we have got for climate mitigation, and then we are suddenly being asked to leapfrog to developed world standards. A long way to put perhaps
it's a very, very pertinent question, right? And think about it this way: a lot of the countries, so one size doesn't fit all. A lot of the countries that already have the luxury of figuring out sustainable ways of packaging, sustainable ways of building food systems, they have that luxury to start making those investments today, right? But for countries like India and other emerging markets, it's really hard to tell a farmer that you can't use fertilizer, right? It's really hard
to see what happened to Sri Lanka.
Exactly.
See what happened to Sri Lanka.
So this idea of...
They busted themselves completely.
Exactly.
The economy has fallen
the path
into a
to
deep,
sustainable...
dark pit. Organic fertilizer. Who told them? Who advised them? Think tanks.
So the path to sustainability has to have a different pace for different economies. And I think the work that different startups are doing and bodies are doing in making that shift is really important. And so
it's not an ideological position that
it's not. I think
but
we
to
need
play the devil's advocate, which is really my job here. I believe some of it, and I'm not questioning your motives or the businesses that you're following, but some of it, and I've been at enough multilateral discussions, it's driven by ideology. It is not driven by reality.
So
Let
me tell you, when I started this, not a single person knew what biodegradable meant, what compostable meant. Okay, so I
Really?
have yes, no. I mean, none of my stakeholders did 13 years ago.
Outside of India, I guess.
I'm talking about no, sir. My business has been India.
Yeah.
Yes.
From my grandparents' time, I remember that the tea that we used to boil and the tea leaves are put there in a pit and that becomes fertilizer.
So that's what we still do at home, right?
Okay.
That's just responsible consumerism, better practices. That's what we're trying to encourage here. And so when I started, this was, like I said, my focus has been India completely. It's only now, because of COVID and the need to de-risk from China, that we are sitting in India and we're getting inbound inquiries. I haven't gone out.
Is a cooler sustainable?
I think so.
And I know the straight question, honest question: is it sustainable?
It can be.
You have to do better than that because
Look, I think there is, like he said, there isn't a one size fits all. Okay, so we supply cloud kitchens. Can you use a cooler to package food and send it out? You can't.
Okay.
Right?
Why is that? Because it breaks?
Because it breaks, right? So, and the beauty of Ecoware.
But I get biryani at home
with those pots, agreed. So let me tell you.
and with beautiful candles.
So the raw,
which I don't know where they are made, whether they're made in India or
and
China.
are they sustainable? Is that
I don't know that.
Is that rampant
but I'm asking
consumerism?
you a serious question. What about that big pot of biryani?
Sure,
clay
but
pot?
then can you use a clamshell box? Can you deliver kebabs in that?
What's a clamshell box?
A typical, like if you went out and got like a
One of those takeaway boxes that has
No, but for instance, even with the Indian
and
Railways.
what material is that made of?
It's sugarcane fiber, it's bagasse.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And let me tell you, the beauty of bagasse and the fibrous strength of it gives it a temperature resistance.
So
you
if
can
I were
use,
to want to buy such stuff to pack my daily tiffin, where can I get that?
you could get it on our website, which is ecoware.in. You can buy it on Amazon. You could just, I don't know where you live.
And
but
how does that retail versus standard packaging material?
how do you mean? Sorry.
What's the price? What's the price?
So I just told you, it was a 10% cost differential.
Oh, okay. Upwards, downwards?
Upwards.
Oh, okay.
But it comes with versatility.
Dhruv,
Comes with...
So is a cooler sustainable? Because the way it's fired,
Exactly.
I don't have to elaborate on that.
So there's cost in manufacturing and everything, right? So then we have to get down to those nitty-gritties. But I think at the most...
No, look at the railways. For years after they introduced cooler, do you know what was one of the single biggest problems? That people would throw them and it would clog the train track, especially at stations.
Is
and
the cooler sustainable? Yes. Is the disposal right?
Exactly. Is it a closed loop?
So I don't think we have to look at things in isolation.
Yeah.
But I think the applicability and is it a good replacement for plastic? Obviously, right? And I think we have to look at...
I learned something with that answer. That's a good point. That
Yeah.
the actual product is sustainable to some extent.
Of course.
The challenge is disposal.
So that's the whole thing. Like now when we look at what we bring into the market, right? Whether it is a plastic ban or whether you want to bring in a healthier alternative for people or planet, you've got to think of a closed loop solution. You've got to think of the end of life of the product. We don't have industrial composting facilities. We're not really recycling. We cannot recycle our way through this mess that we have anyway created, right? So
just too much of it to be
exactly.
recycled.
I mean, look at the Ghazipur landfill. Look at,
I'm going to give another example on this, and this is something we are very deeply passionate about at Nurture Farm. Crop residue burning happens in the north of India. Anybody living in Delhi and around would know this every year. That's also farm waste, right?
Yeah.
And farmers don't have a choice. Why? Because they have a really short window between crop cycles. How do they handle that crop waste? They would just burn it, right? Because they didn't have an alternative. When you give them an alternative, which is what we did, we offered last year 25,000 farmers the ability to not burn and biodecompose it. They 92% of those farmers took this up. What was the result? Actually, farmers incorporated more biomass into the soil. They did not burn, so there was an environmental positive impact. The soil health improved because now, instead of depleting the soil nutrition by burning, they actually incorporated biomass. And so in the next cycle, they used 25% less fertilizer. The yield has gone up by 15 to 20%. It's a win-win. So a shift to sustainable practices and systems requires a complete ecosystem approach, a more holistic approach. You cannot look at things in isolation. Otherwise, it just falls apart.
Okay. As we wind down this conversation, I'm going to ask both of you the same question, and I start with you because it comes from what you just said. If we look at the overall policy architecture that India has through the center and the state, with the state necessarily being in a pole position and then entrepreneurs and the private ecosystem also having a very substantial responsibility both at the state and the center level, do you think the policy architecture is adequate and what needs to be done? And I'm going to add a sting to that question that for years I have believed that the developed world, and I don't hold it against them, but this is just an observation, use the developing world as their outsourced farming destination. They preserved their land, they preserved their forests, their water. They didn't use too many chemicals and pesticides as a consequence. The developing world has taken the burden. Shouldn't the West also be helping those countries to move towards sustainability in the long run?
How long do we have? Like a couple of hours?
Oh, okay. So let me give you that in India then. You have 2 minutes, the clock starts now.
So let me give you the really brief version.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at the livelihood factor here for a country like India and other emerging economies, right? Agriculture is always going to be a mainstay, and it needs to be, because if we have to feed 1.5 billion people, and we spoke
And
about
export.
and we
Yeah.
spoke about resilience and having
That's how farmers
sufficient-
will get good prices, not through MSP, ultimately through exports.
Correct. And having a self-sufficient food supply chain, we have that luxury because we grow it ourselves. So we must not lose that. Are there policies and frameworks out there to support that? There are. But is the implementation always where it needs to be? Definitely not. And I think this is where private enterprise, startups can play a big role, is helping work with multilateral bodies, government bodies to help keep evolving how those policies get implemented on the ground. And we've started doing a lot of work as a platform in that space. Our role is not to invent new technologies.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much is government doing?
I think more than, again, these are binary questions. I wouldn't want to answer that. But what I would say is there is more than enough support from the government. But is it readily available all the time to the farmers in the right way? Probably not. And I think that's where helping farmers better understand, have access to the right means, the right advisory, the right incentives is where we are focusing. We see that as a gap. And that's where a platform like Nurture Farm can play a big role.
I'm not going to repeat that question.
Sure.
I'm going to throw a personal example at you.
Go for it.
Many years back, I was studying to acquire a business degree, and at one of these management events in IIM Bangalore, 4 of us presented the idea of a Tetra Pak sugarcane juice.
Right.
We had no clue as to how we could even get a Tetra Pak juice, and we didn't even know if the sugarcane juice would stay long enough, how fast it would decompose. Obviously, we knew this much, that there was enough sugar content. Since you talk about sustainable packing, is there still a business idea left in that?
Yes, of course there is. But like I said earlier,
So
it's
how
about-
could I sustainably pack
So
it?
let me just come back to it. It boils down to a closed loop solution.
Okay.
Okay, so let me tell you that having operated in India for the last 13 years, we have seen bans come in, not being enforced, being enforced. And so our focus has been education, because I believe that when someone makes an educated choice, that's a lifelong choice, right? And it's not just about, and education is really important because we've got to think about a closed loop solution. We have very little waste
So my
management.
closed loop learning from you is sugarcane fiber pack
Yes.
and the sugarcane juice inside it?
Well, it depends now if you need to line that pack. If it has a lining, it will require industrial composting. And we don't have that in India.
Okay.
So it has to be completely natural. It has to maintain the product inside, whether it's liquid or food. And it has to be able to meet your SOPs and your shelf life.
Well, there you have it, from 2 passionate young entrepreneurs and business people who are trying to make India go green and ensure that our farming and the consumption of our food is sustainable. Thank you very much for your time. With that, it's a wrap on this show. If you've been, thank you very much for watching.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.